Hello, friends. Welcome back into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Real quick aside, for those of you who don't know, I do this basically 365 days a year here on the YouTube channel, but we have an entire team of amazing podcasters over on our audio channel as well. Some days it will be the same episode, but the vast majority of the time, it is a brand new episode from another set of amazing podcasters. People like Maggie Loney and Perry Goldstein and Dusty Evely. We got Jason Perrone. We got just a tremendous amount of people. So if you haven't checked out the audio version of the podcast yet, please make sure to do so. I think you're really going to enjoy that as well. Enough about that. In a moment, I'm going to go over one of the really crazy what ifs in Packer history. If I have learned one thing over my time doing this, which is I don't even know how long now, people hate hypotheticals and what ifs. I don't get it. I don't know why. People just get very upset by them. I'm going to do it anyway, just because I want to do it. I think it's fun. I think it's interesting to look back. And when I talked last year about the potential of trading Aaron Rodgers and why it was such a franchise-altering decision on what they decided to do in 2022, well, today you're going to see why. And that's why there's a couple of reasons I want to go over it. One, I just think it's very interesting to see like what if, what could have happened. But B, almost to give a cautionary tale of like, hey, you had this opportunity last year and it would have been a much better deal for Green Bay last year, undoubtedly, than what any possible trade would be this year. But it's still a cautionary tale of like, we could very well be, if Aaron Rodgers returns this year, we could be talking next year at this exact same time saying, what if Green Bay would have moved on from Aaron Rodgers in 2023 and received some draft compensation and didn't have this massive cap hit in 2024? This is another one of those moments where Green Bay's decision on what they do with Aaron Rodgers for this upcoming season has massive consequences, as we've gone over already in various videos so far, but has massive consequences on the future of the Green Bay Packers, no matter what ends up happening, whether they keep him, whether they whether they trade him, whatever. It is going to alter this franchise just as a move last year would have. And I want to go over that and look at that today. And again, hopefully have it be a cautionary tale of if you're hoping for Aaron this year, I'll say it one more time. I get it. I understand it. This is not an easy decision. It's not fantasy football. It's not Madden. But there are real consequences if you do not move him and you don't win a Super Bowl or don't have a successful 2023. It just prolongs a massive rebuild that's going to have to happen at some point. Last year, you had the opportunity to accelerate that rebuild in an insane way with that package from the Denver Broncos. This year, you have the opportunity at least to take your medicine and start eating some of those salary cap hits and get Aaron Rodgers mostly or even entirely off the books if you do it pre-June 1st and start moving forward into a new era. By not doing that, you just continue to push things down and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So this is the reason that I wanted to go through that. Before we get there, a couple quick notes. Also involving the Denver Broncos, Aaron Rodgers, Nathaniel Hackett. This all comes full circle, I guess. But Nathaniel Hackett was fired by the Denver Broncos, and on Thursday, he signed with a new team. He signed with the New York Jets. And what very much feels like hey, Aaron, heads up, your old buddy Nathaniel Hackett's over here now. Just in case you're interested in, Robert Saleh already mentioned, and there's been reports already that the Jets are very interested in seeking out a veteran quarterback for 2023. No names were given, so you can fill in the blank with whatever veteran quarterback name that you would personally like. There seems to maybe be some tea leaves there of what quarterback they may be interested in with the hiring of Nathaniel Hackett. Rodgers has been on record of saying in the past he hopes that Nathaniel Hackett doesn't go anywhere. This is when he was an offensive coordinator for the Packers, unless he went somewhere. So read into all the tea leaves that you will, but of course that's going to cause a little bit of a stir and a little bit of a buzz when we're already in a powder keg of Aaron Rodgers conversation, right? So that was the big news from Thursday. The other thing that I wanted to go over that's not newsworthy or noteworthy, but I see this comment all the time on Twitter, on social media. I think I've seen it in the comments below on YouTube. Obviously, I have been somebody that has been championing a Aaron Rodgers trade. I think it's the right move for the franchise. It just is what it is. That to me is the best move for 1265 and for the Packers, the G, the logo, the Green Bay Packers organization, it's not what's fun always. It's not the easiest decision, but what I think is best is to trade Aaron Rodgers and get as much as you can in return and start an aggressive rebuild. That's what I think is best. If you disagree, I get it. I understand. There's no easy, perfect way. There's no easy, perfect solution. But I've been somebody that has been going over that. And the comment that I get over and over is, you just wait. Wait till Aaron Rodgers is leading some team to the playoffs next year and Jordan Love is struggling and you're 6-11. Yeah, that's exactly what I expect to happen. I absolutely expect the team that trades for Aaron Rodgers to be making a run at the playoffs. And I very much do not expect Green Bay in 2023 with Jordan Love to be making a run at the playoffs. That's not to say that the team that trades for Aaron may end up outside of the playoffs. That doesn't mean that Green Bay with Jordan Love couldn't end up in the playoffs. A lot of crazy things can happen. But yeah, my expectation is that Rodgers is probably going to be, having a potential MVP caliber season, trying his best to do that at least, probably playing at a high level, probably playing for a team that's out there trying to win a championship, probably at minimum getting into the playoffs. And Green Bay is probably going to go through a pretty significant, just reality check of, hey, there's no more Brett Favre, there's no more Aaron Rodgers, and now it's Jordan Love time, and there's probably going to be some growing pains with that. So, yeah, if you think that's going to be a surprise to me, that they traded Aaron and now that team's good and now Green Bay's not as good, no, that's what I would expect. The issue being, again, and I'm not going to go through the whole episode here, is that to me, the opportunity cost of not getting something in return for Aaron, of taking a massive cap hit in 2024 and going all in on a team that I just don't think has the ability to win a Super Bowl in 2023, that to me is worse. And even though that some other team's going to be better and Green Bay is going to be worse for the short term, for now, it to me gets you closer to a team that can be competitive again in hopefully 2025 or 2026 and not set that clock back even further by staying with the status quo and trying to do the same thing over and over and running your head into a wall. You get the point. So if anyone thinks that I'm not aware that the team that trades for Aaron is going to be better and Green Bay is probably going to be worse, I get that. I still think ultimately that it is the best move. So just a comment that I've seen a lot, and I just wanted to address that. So without further ado, main topic for today, what if Green Bay would have taken the Denver Broncos trade? First and foremost, we don't know, number one, if Denver offered the exact same trade. We do know, at least it's been reported, that Denver's first interest was Rodgers. When Rodgers said he was returning to Green Bay, they then pivoted to Russell Wilson. That has been reported. Ben Albright was the main reporter on that, I believe, but that has been reported that their first interest was Aaron Rodgers, and the timeline fits. They did not make the move for Russell Wilson until Aaron Rodgers had decided that he was going to be back in Green Bay, and then they immediately pivoted to Russell Wilson. You can sort of put two and two together and feel like, all right, if they liked Rodgers more and they were willing to give up that deal for Wilson, they were probably willing to give up something similar for Aaron Rodgers. So we're just going to go with that. The second thing is we don't know for sure that Aaron would have played for Denver. Maybe he would have said, I want to turn to Green Bay. Green Bay would have said no, but we're willing to trade you to Denver. And Aaron just would have said, you know what? I think I'd rather just retire then instead. That's a possibility. Or he might have said, I don't want to play in Denver. I want to play in San Francisco. I want to play only in this one spot. And if you don't trade me there, I'm just going to retire. So you are forced to trade me to one team. That could have potentially happened as well. So we don't know, as we go through this Marvel what if scenario, what ultimately would have come to fruition. Some of the names and players, just like in our offseason blueprint that we did earlier this year, the four of them that we did, the names and the players might change. It might be different, but I want to give you a sense and an idea of what might have been possible if this scenario could have come to fruition. So Aaron would have played in Denver. They would have got the Russell Wilson package, and Green Bay would have had a ton of draft capital. That's the what if that we're going over today. So what was the trade? Let's go back for a second and just review quick what the Seahawks and Broncos trade ultimately ended up being. It was Russell Wilson and a 4th round pick for a 2022 first, a 2022 second, a 2022 fifth, which ended up being the 9th, 40th, and 145th pick in last year's draft, a first and a second in this upcoming 2023 draft. They also received Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, and Drew Lock. All right, so a couple things. We're going to say, just for the sake of saying it, that instead of giving up the 4th round pick, and just because Aaron's a little bit older, they're going to give up a 3rd round pick instead of a 4th round pick. So instead of Russell Wilson and a 4th, they're going to give up Aaron Rodgers and a 3rd. We're also going to say in this deal that Green Bay would not have taken back Shelby Harris. I don't know why Seattle exactly took back Shelby Harris, because they ended up going to the playoffs, so I guess it worked out. But for Green Bay, I don't think they would have been interested in taking on a 31-year-old defensive lineman who had salary cap hits of $4.7 million and $12.2 million over a 2-year remaining contract when they weren't expected to compete in those next 2 seasons. They already had defensive linemen on their roster. They were going to go into the draft with a ton of draft picks. I don't think they would have been interested in Shelby Harris. So I'm going to leave Shelby Harris out of the deal. I'm going to say that Green Bay would have given up a 3rd instead of a 4th, just to kind of make up for some of that age with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, etc. And if you look at that 4th round pick, it would have been earlier than either of Green Bay's pick, and actually the 3rd and the 4th are much closer than the 4th and any other of Green Bay's 4th round picks. So just to throw that out there one more time. So it's going to be Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd round pick for a 1st, a 2nd, a 5th, a 1st, a 2nd, Noah Fant, and Drew Lock, no Shelby Harris. So that's what we're going to go with today. We're also going to remember that at this point, the Christian Watson deal was not made. The Devontae Adams deal, we're going to say, would have been made the exact same way, but they did not trade picks 53 and 59 up into early in the 2nd round to draft Christian Watson yet, because the draft hadn't taken place at this time. So they would have gone into the draft with picks 9, 22, 28, 40, 53, 59, 132, 140, 145, 179, 228, 234, 249, 258. A massive butt ton, that is a scientific draft term, a massive butt ton of draft picks in 2022. They still would have had a 1st and a 2nd from Denver in 2023 as well. Now, my first thing here I want to say about all of these picks is I can almost guarantee you that Brian Gutekunst would have been just maneuvering all over the draft, moving up, moving down, gaining extra picks, maybe even trading some of these out into 2023 so that he would have had more capital in 2023 and they wouldn't be taking on all these rookies in 1 year. But we're just going to go with today that they would have used all of these picks in some capacity. So what could have that draft looked like? So let's say they pick at pick 9. Some players there that would have made sense for Green Bay: Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver; Chris Olave, the wide receiver; Jamison Williams, the wide receiver; Charles Cross, the offensive tackle, who actually was taken at that position; Jordan Davis, the big Georgia defensive lineman. They could have added another Georgia defender to their insanely rich Georgia draft already. And then Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame. In this situation, you now have Jordan Love at quarterback. You know how insanely important it is for him to get weapons. They were severely lacking in young weapons. I think they have to go wide receiver here, and I think it starts with Garrett Wilson. Maybe they take Olave instead. I think Wilson would have been a little bit more their type, would have been close, but I'm going to say Green Bay takes Garrett Wilson at pick 9. Then pick 22, I'm still going to say they stick with Quay Walker. Pick 28, I'm going to say they stick with Devontae Wyatt. So no changes there. I don't see why it would have changed anything. If those were the best 2 players on their board, they still would have been the best 2 players on their board. So they leave the first round with Garrett Wilson, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt. Now, their next pick is at pick 40. Couple questions. Did they move up still? Now, remember, they don't have to move from pick 53. They only have to move from pick 40. Do they move up still to go get Christian Watson? If they don't move up to get Christian Watson, is he still there at pick 40? Remember, they pick him at pick 34? Does he fall a few more picks to pick 40? That potentially is an option too, or maybe they just move up, or maybe because they got Garrett Wilson in the first round, maybe they're not quite as keen to move up for Christian Watson or take Christian Watson in the second round. So we are actually going to say here, Christian Watson, if he was there, would have made some sense. Boye Mafe, the edge rusher from the University of Minnesota, could have made some sense. And then Jaquan Brisker, the safety that ultimately went to the Bears, I think could have made some sense here as well. I think Green Bay, assuming Watson's off the board, assuming they didn't move up to get him, I'm going to say Jaquan Brisker is actually the player that makes a lot of sense here for Green Bay. Not in hindsight, because he had a really good year in Chicago. I just think and you'll see, because I'm not going to draft the best guys at each pick that you could do. Kenneth Walker, the running back, Kenneth Walker, the running back for the Seahawks, could have made some sense here. Or maybe not sense in the fact that they already have Jones and Dillon, but he would have been an insanely talented player that was there. I'm going to say Jaquan Brisker is the pick that they make at pick 40. At pick 53, I said from the beginning of the draft until almost the end that Alec Pierce was just such a Packers type. They didn't take Watson. Remember, they ended up taking 3 wide receivers in this draft anyway. I think Alec Pierce is there. I think they ultimately take Alec Pierce at pick 53. Drake Jackson, the edge rusher for the 49ers, hasn't had a great year for the 49ers. He was absolutely their type. I think they would have taken a flyer on him at pick 59. And then remember, they don't have a 3rd-round pick anymore. It would have been used in the trade, so bye-bye Sean Ryan. I know, disappointing, sad. Then you end up with Romeo Doubs still in the 4th. Zach Tom still in the 4th, and maybe they went to taking Dobbs at that point because they already had Pierce and Wilson. I just think that if they really like Dobbs at that point, I don't see why you don't. They know they're going to need a ton of weapons moving forward. Lazard, Cobb, Watkins, all those guys were getting old in age. I just don't think it changed anything. So still Dobbs at 132, Zach Tom at pick 140. I'm going to say they take offensive lineman Matt Waletzko, offensive tackle who ended up with the Cowboys. He was absolutely their type, their profile, etc. Has versatility along the offensive line. Then the rest of the draft's going to remain exactly the same. Enigbare, Carpenter, Ford, Walker, Toure. So what you ultimately end up doing is basically trading out Christian Watson and Sean Ryan in this draft. So you no longer have Watson and Ryan, and instead you get Garrett Wilson, Jaquan Brisker, Alec Pierce, and Drake Jackson, as well as Matt Waletzko. So that's a good trade. And you might say, like, hey, Christian Watson versus Garrett Wilson. Wilson's better, but like Watson's a stud too. So like, didn't gain that much there. But then getting Brisker and then getting Alec Pierce, getting Drake Jackson, and then let's go. Like you just end up with some really serious draft capital and some potential players there that can help you long term as well. So where does that leave you with a roster in 2023 or in 2022? So we got Jordan Love and Drew Lock as your quarterbacks, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon at running back. You've got Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, Romeo Doubs, Alec Pierce, and Sammy Watkins, Samori Toure at your wide receivers. Amari Rodgers maybe would have made that initial roster. Maybe they move on from him quicker. Maybe they move on from Watkins quicker. Remember, Watkins and Reed had already been signed. That's why I think they really wanted Rodgers back at that point, is because they had already made investments into into a lot of the players that they signed in free agency. But maybe with the trade being, if they could have got it done earlier, maybe they don't sign Watkins. So in fact, we'll just say that. We'll just say they don't sign Watkins in this scenario. So we'll just say it's Wilson, Lazard, Dobbs, Pierce, Toure, and Amari. Noah Fant at tight end with Tunyon, Lewis, and DeGuara. Bakhtiari, Nyman, Tom, Walker, and Waletzko at tackle. Jenkins, Runyon, Newman, and Hanson at guard, and Josh Myers at center. You've then got Kenny Clark, Jerron Reed, Dean Lowry, Slayton, and Wyatt, your 5 defensive linemen. Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, and then you've got Drake Jackson and J.J. Enigbare at the edge. Campbell, Walker, Barnes, McDuffie, Jair Stokes, Douglas, Shamar, Nixon. And then safety becomes Amos, Brisker, Savage, Ford, Carpenter, Levitt, same special teams, etc. So then the question becomes, all right, what does your outcome look like for that season? I don't know, maybe 6-11, 7-10? I'm going to say maybe 6-11 with Jordan Love at quarterback. Probably still get a couple wins against the Bears. Probably still get a win against the Rams. You win a couple games here or there. Maybe you actually beat the Commanders. I think they can get to 6-11 on the season with Jordan Love and that specific roster as your starters. What did the Broncos get? Well, remember, they won 5 games with Russell Wilson. Now, Rodgers was definitely better than Russell. That defense was amazing. But they had a really tough schedule. They had some really tough games on their schedule. And remember, the whole Hackett experience as head coach just didn't turn out. And maybe with Rodgers, it would have turned out a little bit different. But I think if you're saying all of a sudden they go from 5 wins to 13 wins just because of Aaron, I don't see that being the case. So just because they go from Wilson to Aaron, I think that everything else is the exact same team. And I think it does get you 3 or 4 more wins. But let's just say they win 4 more games. Let's say they beat the Colts, the Raiders, the Jets, the Rams, all winnable games with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. That gets them to 9 wins. They would have been 9-8 on the year, and they would have been just outside of the playoffs, finishing just below the Miami Dolphins for that final spot, with the conference tiebreaker being the difference. So they would not have made it to the playoffs. So what would that have meant for 2023 resources? If the Packers went 6-11, at worst, At worst, even if we're handing the Colts and those, the Jets another loss because the Broncos would have beat them, at worst, we're looking at the 8th overall pick for the Packers if they finish 6-11. If they finish worse than that, you could be picking even higher. Then maybe they finish 7-10, and maybe it ends up being the 12th pick or something like that, and not that different. But you're 6-11, you're probably picking somewhere between 6 and 8, which is a massive draft pick. Then with the Broncos finishing 9-8 in that scenario, you're picking 17th. At worst, in that scenario, if the Packers finish 6-11 and the Broncos finish 9-8, which I think are fair records to assume given the scenarios and the situations, you now have picks 8 and 17, also 39 and 48 in the second round as well. So you now have 4 top 50 picks, including the 8th and 17th overall, to go with 39th and 48th in the second round. 4 top 50 picks that are going to help you build this team. So even before a draft where the Packers gain the Packers have a ton of picks in this year's draft, even without the additional first and second. Now they've got 4 in the top 50 that have the ability to rebuild this roster. You have the opportunity to have a massive draft this upcoming year. Now you've got Jordan Love at quarterback, and maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but you ultimately would have had the opportunity to actually evaluate him in 2022 in this scenario. Maybe they need to go up and get a quarterback. Maybe they want to get Levis. Maybe they want to get Stroud. Maybe they want to get one of these top quarterbacks. If that's the case, remember, they now have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, all their picks next year, all the picks the following year. They can trade Jordan Love if they wanted to go in a different direction. You've got a pretty substantial draft package that you can use if you want to go up. And if Jordan Love wasn't your guy and they believe in one of these quarterbacks in this draft, Stroud, Young, Levis, etc., they have a ton of draft capital to go up and get that quarterback. Maybe they keep Love on the roster. Maybe they go get one of those quarterbacks anyway. That's within the realm of possibility. What if Jordan Love and the Packers struggled way worse? What if they ended up with 3 wins? Now you might be talking about a team that's got the first, second, third pick in the draft, especially if all of a sudden the Bears pick up a couple wins against the Packers last year. They're no longer picking first overall. Things could have gotten pretty interesting in that scenario too. But you've got a ton of draft capital. You've got Love. These are just the young players that they're going to have to have the ability to build around, going into this season, had this situation come to fruition. Jordan Love at quarterback, Dillon at running back, Garrett Wilson at wide receiver, Alec Pierce at wide receiver, Dobbs and Toure. That's a heck of a core 4 at wide receiver to start off with, young second-year players. Noah Fant and DeGuara at tight end, Zach Tom and Yosh Nijman at tackle, Elton Jenkins and running at guard, Josh Myers at center, Clark Slayton Wyatt along the defensive line, Gary Enigbare and Jackson at edge, Quay Walker at inside linebacker, Jair and Stokes at corner, and Brisker at safety. Not to mention 4 top 50 picks and a lot of other resources. The other thing, salary cap's still going to be tight in 2023. It's still going to be a little bit difficult because you're probably going to start taking your medicine on some of those veterans, the Bakhtiaris, the Joneses, etc. But 2024, with all those rookies in 2022, all those rookies in 2023, a lot of young talent. 2024, if you did everything right and took all your medicine in 2023, the salary cap explodes in 2024, and guess what you have? Blank check. You've got a talented young roster and a ton of free agent salary cap space to use in 2024. And the rebuild, you still probably go through a little bit of a transition period in 2020, certainly in 2023, maybe a little bit in 2024, but you are off and running. You could be back in the playoffs in 2024, 2025 if you play things right, legitimately. And part of that is finding a quarterback, maybe, but you build an awesome team up. Take a look at the San Francisco 49ers. You don't always need the best quarterback in the world to make things click. That is a possibility for what could have happened. Now, same thing I went over in the Blueprint series. Change some of the names, change some of the draft picks, change some of the way that things went down for Green Bay. There could have been some different scenarios. Maybe Green Bay and Denver both finish better. Maybe Green Bay ends up with the 15th pick, Denver ends up with the 25th pick, and maybe it's not quite as much draft capital. I think certainly this, things could have definitely changed for what they would have gotten in return. I think, who knows how things would have went. But if that trade was anywhere near the same trade that they gave to the Seattle Seahawks, Green Bay would have the opportunity to really, really pull this around and make a very, very fast rebuild out of things. And if all of a sudden Jordan Love was really, really good, you're well ahead of the curve. And even if he was really, really bad, now you've got the opportunity to find your quarterback in 2023 as well. Some other what ifs in this scenario. What does it mean for Denver, Hackett, Rodgers? Does Nathaniel Hackett still have his job as head coach? Is Aaron Rodgers coming back to play in Denver again in 2023? Not sure. That would have been an interesting one to keep an eye on. And the other thing, that just the cherry on top of this entire Sunday, what if, because Aaron Rodgers is a Denver Bronco, Seattle Seahawks still would have traded Russell Wilson, in my opinion. When Russell Wilson initially named the teams he wanted to go to, one of the 3 teams on his list, the Chicago Bears. What if the Chicago Bears would have given up Justin Fields and a bunch of draft capital for Russell Wilson and opened up this Russell Wilson window that we now know was completely non-existent, and you have this massive Russell Wilson contract in Chicago, no Justin Fields, no number 1 overall pick, and you completely have now buried yourself in a Russell Wilson deal, just like Denver is right now. They are stuck. They are in no man's land. Chicago could have been that team too if they would have made a run at him. Maybe they would not have, but in this whole scenario, you probably would have turned Green Bay's turnaround in, like, you would have made it go so incredibly fast. And in the same process, either maybe would have screwed over Chicago if they would have been the team that ultimately traded for Russell Wilson. Even if they weren't, if they pick up just one win against the Packers in 2022, against the Jordan Love-led Packers with a younger team, they're no longer picking number 1 overall. The Texans are, and that would have hurt the Bears as well. So a lot that would have gone into this. A lot would have changed. It would have been a franchise-altering move for Green Bay. It would have been one that would have put the Packers in an extremely positive situation as we would have went into this offseason. It doesn't guarantee anything. Draft picks don't guarantee you anything. Maybe they would have picked every wrong selection with those picks. Maybe it would have been way worse in 2022. Maybe they wouldn't have been as set up as well in 2023, and this would have been, a decade of decline. This is all within the realm of possibility. That's the things about what ifs, is you can never really put it through the test and the ringer and say 100% for sure. I think, and I really believe, that Green Bay would have been in a better spot from a franchise standpoint had they been a little bit more aggressive and willing to make that trade in 2022. As I said before, not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do in 2023 either. Still going to be extremely interested to see what Brian Gutekunst and Aaron Rodgers ultimately decide, and if he's ultimately playing for the Packers. And if they are, as I mentioned, we could be having a very similar conversation in 2024. That's going to do it for me today. Thanks as always for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.